Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. Let's start from the Kupyansk direction. We have information that the Russians renewed their offensive operation in Tinkovka. For now they're just trying to suppress the Ukrainian forces with Lancet. During the previous days, during the first waves of Russian attack to the northern part of the city, the Ukrainians were forced to concentrate significant number of armored vehicles, tanks and personnel carriers in this area, and they managed to repel first Russian attacks on the north, and now the Russians started hunting and destroying the Ukrainian armored vehicle. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed that the Russians also have concentrated significant number of Ka-52 helicopters on this direction, so within the next week or two, first the Russians will reduce the number of armored vehicles, and after that we're going to see new waves and new attempts from the Russian side to attack the Ukrainian positions in Tinkovka. Now we are moving further to the south in direction of Berestova, Krakhmalny. If you remember, we just discussed that during the previous 2 days the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to establish control over the village by the name of Krakhmalny. A lot of sources reported that the Russians continue advancing further to the south of Berestova, and today we have some updates from different mappers. For example, according to Syriac, this territory either was captured by the Russians, so he confirms the words of Rybar. Now we are moving further to the south in direction of Liman area. We continue receiving updates from this territory. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed the Russian attack in Kremenaya forest to the south in direction of Siverskyi Donets river. As if you remember, the Russians managed to advance and to capture additional territories. Furthermore, the Russians made another attack along Siverskyi Donets river from Shipilovka. This is the village Shipilovka in direction of Belogorovka, and very likely the first Russian target is to fight for these buildings and these constructions. Very likely today we're going to receive more updates from this territory, and we got another updates. The Russian sources published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions. To be more precise, let's say the pontoon bridges, maybe the areas of river crossings along Siverskyi Donets. This is the village by the name of Serebryanka. This is Siverskyi Donets. You might see these the signs, and this is the bombings right along the river. So the Russians trying to advance, as we discussed, in Kremenaya forest, and as we can see, the Ukrainians use the bridgehead and the villages around Siversk to supply and support their forces in the forest. So that's while the Russians are attacking on the northern flank to the north, they are bombing and destroying the Ukrainians, let's say, pontoon bridges and river crossings. We haven't received anything for a very long period of time from Veselaya Sporna. The Russians are trying to dig in deeper. I expect that soon we're going to start receiving more updates and the clashes in this area will be renewed. Bogdanovka is always under very heavy clashes and fightings between the parties. A lot of sources reported that the Russians continue advancing in the central part. As we discussed, few Russian sources have already reported about the complete fall of Bogdanovka, but those were speculations. Russians established control over the east-northern part. Very likely the Russians have already established control over the central part, but southwestern part is under complete Ukrainian control. So the Russians continue advancing. And the first thing and the next thing the Russians are planning and trying to do is to establish control over this territory, which will allow them to get the entrance to the main stronghold located in this area. So they will be able to start moving to the south along these three lines to capture and to start battle for this Ukrainian stronghold, which is very important and key stronghold in this area. When talking about the southwestern part, we have geolocation confirming the Ukrainian presence in this area. On this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian FPV drone position. They managed to discover and to spot the launch of FPV drone by the Ukrainian forces, and after that the Russians start bombing this territory, and probably the position of FPV drone with FPV drone operator was destroyed. We haven't received anything during the night about the battle for Ivanovska. The only just separate sources are saying about further offensive operation. Today I believe we're going to receive more updates. We haven't received anything during the night from Avdiivka area. Very likely the Russians will continue advancing here as well. But when talking about the fields, the Russians continue publishing updates about Lancet strikes in this area, and if we increase the numbers of updates, first let's take a look. On this video we see the Russians discovered another artillery position, M777 howitzer, and the ammo to this howitzer and support tracked, and as a result of counterfire this let's say unit was destroyed with Lancet or artillery strike. Interesting thing, if we increase the numbers of updates since the 20th of January, we're gonna see that the number of Lancet strikes, 1, 2, 3, we have explosions, so a lot of Lancet. The Russians are trying to suppress the Ukrainian positions, and as we can see they are pretty well effective. Very interesting updates are coming from Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade. The Ukrainians start publishing very interesting photos of Ukrainian brigade, Storm Brigade on the horses. So it's very interesting and very weird in the picture, because now we know that Ukrainians have a lot of problems with military aid, with Western support. I don't remember when the last time the Western countries sent Ukrainian tanks, and these photos with horses might make a feeling that very likely maybe in a half a year, with the same level of support from the Western countries, the Ukrainians will be turned into something like Afghanistan army, like Taliban army or something like this. Furthermore, we got another proof, not like a proof. For example, on this video we can see evacuation of Ukrainian soldiers. On this video they're also using horses as the main, let's say, engine power. So we see that situation for the Ukrainians is getting worse and worse. So this is the future, and this is the things that they need to expect within the next months of clashes. For example, the Russians from their side publish very interesting video of invisible cloak. On this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were testing this type of equipment during the night period of time. We see the temperature sign of one Russian soldier, and at some moment another Russian soldier took off his cloak, and now we see the type of equipment the Russians have. Of course, this is very important type of equipment during the special military operation that can reduce the losses among the personnel during the night period of times and against during the bombings with FPV drones. So very interesting, like changes in Russian army and in Ukrainian army as well. Now we're moving to Avdiivka. We have a lot of very interesting details. If you remember, yesterday we adjusted the map in Saborная, Sportivная Street, and today we got some updates from different mappers that shows additional Russian progress in the along Sportivная and Saborная and Chernyshevskaya Street. So according to Syriac, the Russians continue advancing in this area. And this night the Ukrainian 110th Brigade, as usually, published another batch of videos showing the FPV drone strikes against the Russian infantry in the southern part of Avdiivka, and there were a lot of strikes, a lot of FPV drones from the Ukrainian side, and a lot of videos were geolocated by the OSINT resources, and the geolocations of Ukrainian strikes took place very far from, let's say, original configuration of the front line, as we discussed, like according to changes on the military summary map. So according to 110th Brigade, the attacks of FPV drone strikes took place here, and probably the farthest strike took place here. So according to these two geolocations, now we have the right to change the map and to show this territory under complete Russian control. So we will adjust the map before the next video. Another important thing, if this updates is correct, if the Russians manage to dig in deeper in this area, that means that the Russians managed to cut the Ukrainians that located in the former air defense base and Cheburashka stronghold. Obviously, today we need to expect updates of the Russian withdrawing and retreating from this territory further to the north in the 9th quarter. Also, we have another interesting detail about the Russian progress, and we are talking about this photo. As you can see, as a result of clashes, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to establish control over the highest positions in Avdiivka. Now the Russians control every single hill around Avdiivka. To the north, the Russians control Terikon. To the south, the Russians control Sportivная streets, industrial area, Tsarskaya Khota fortification, and the rest of Avdiivka is located in the lowland in comparison of the Russians. Now the Russians can see entire Avdiivka from the north to the south, from the west to the east, and it will reduce the Ukrainian possibilities. And of course, now the Ukrainians will be always 24 hours per 7 days a week under very heavy fire from the Russian side. So the entire Avdiivka is in the lowland. On the north, the Russians control the hill, and to the south, the Russians control the hill as well. When talking about South Donetsk direction, we haven't received anything, but this is a very important update because the last time the last Russian progress took place here probably a week ago. So very likely after a very short operational pause in a week, the Russians will renew their offensive operation further, and this we're gonna start receiving updates probably at the beginning of this week. When talking about Robotyne, the Russians continue FPV drone strikes. Today, during the previous night, 2 videos were published. Very likely these are old videos because according to configuration, these territories that where we can see these strikes were, at least according to this configuration, were under Russian control. But maybe these are old video, or maybe the Ukrainians somehow managed to counterattack, returning their positions. Anyway, we'll see. But the activity in Robotyne is very heavy, so probably very likely soon there are going to be another wave of escalation. Nothing happened in Kherson, just another Lancet strike. Very likely this is maybe even old video because the activity in this area was reduced completely. No clashes, no movements, no big reports, no big updates, nothing like this. So very likely the foothold in Krynki, maybe there are a few buildings still on the Ukrainians, but the main part is under Russian control. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.